You have to really recognize and remember that you can't fix anyone. You have to learn how to set boundaries and how to keep boundaries. Hi, this is Jim Breon. Welcome to this YouTube channel where we discuss all things mental health. The topic today is something I've had questions from multiple people, and it's why is it that I always end up in relationships with narcissists? We talk a lot about narcissists on the channel, and I work with a lot of people who've been in relationships with narcissists and other high conflict personalities. And many people will tell me that every relationship they seem to get into is with one of these types of personalities, and they can't understand why that is. So I wanted to explore some of the reasons that people may end up in relationships repeatedly with a high conflict personality or someone like a narcissist. First of all, family history and relationship history plays a strong part in it. So as your body and brain developed, living in that atmosphere, all of the dynamics that you grew up in with a narcissistic parent seemed normal to you. And you may not have had too many other examples of what a family system looks like and feels like. And if you've been in a relationship in the past with someone who's a narcissist and you've experienced all of the manipulation and gaslighting and the undermining, then again, that feels normal to you. And you might actually resonate with someone that comes into your life that has that same kind of feeling. And we have to remember that narcissists are very charming, flattering. They know exactly how to look like the perfect partner when they first meet somebody. So many people are susceptible to that superficial charm. So many people are vulnerable to that type of persona, especially if you buy into some concepts of toxic masculinity. People that have low self-esteem and maybe have lived with a history of chronic invalidation can end up in relationships with a difficult personality like this, like a narcissist. Again, it's the way that you grow used to being treated poorly, of being invalidated and feeling like your feelings don't make sense, wondering if you really are kind of crazy or if there's something wrong with you. And when another person comes into your life and you perceive them as being strong and confident, then people can look at that person as somebody who's going to sort of complete them or somehow protect them until, of course, the devaluing starts. If you're a rescuer or a fixer, then you're vulnerable to falling into a relationship with this type of personality. You want to think about the drama triangles that we've talked about before, and if that's not something you're familiar with, maybe check out that video. Drama triangles include one person that plays a victim, another person is a rescuer that tries to fix that person or fix things for them, and then there's often a perpetrator in that drama triangle. And if you look at somebody who's a narcissist and you see all of those toxic behaviors, but then you think, oh my gosh, they wouldn't be like that if they hadn't had such a terrible childhood themselves, then you can have empathy for them, which we should have, yet you don't hold them responsible for their behaviors. And if you're a rescuer and a fixer, and especially if you have some traits of codependency, then you can fall into those patterns of trying to rescue a narcissist. When people play roles in relationships to complete themselves or to create an identity, this is called enmeshment, and that's something that a lot of people learn growing up in dysfunctional families. It's not intimacy, but people mistake it for intimacy. But it's very important to understand the difference between intimacy and enmeshment. Intimacy is when two people are deeply interested in understanding each other and they share their vulnerabilities, and those vulnerabilities are held and protected like a little bird in your hand, not weaponized as a narcissist will do. If you want to learn more about enmeshment and intimacy and emotionally immature parents, maybe check out that video as well. Often people live out something we call a repetition compulsion. And this happens when maybe there's a relationship you had early in your life that was fraught with problems and you could never understand the relationship and you could never work it out. And people will get into relationships with people later in their lives in an attempt to work out those issues with another person. I mentioned codependency, and codependency is a huge factor that might lead somebody to a relationship with a narcissist. Codependency is when one person takes responsibility for another person's emotions, and they count on people being dependent on them. That makes them feel needed, and they end up managing another person's emotions. But that's a really, really dysfunctional pattern to fall into. When we don't pay attention to our intuition and we don't pay attention to red flags, we can get into a relationship with a narcissist again and again and again. I kind of joke sometimes that if you're wearing rose-colored glasses, that red flags look gray. But that's really true, that if you see those red flags in a relationship, but you don't want to see them because you're in love with being in love, or you want to love that person into healthiness, then you ignore your intuition. Many people who find themselves in a relationship with a narcissist repeatedly mistake drama and intensity with love. A relationship with a narcissist often is fast and furious at the beginning, and you feel like it's, almost too good to be true, because it is. And people mistake that kind of drama and intensity with intimacy and love, but those are very different things. Often in a relationship with a narcissist, even when there's a rupture in the relationship, the makeup sex is great, and that intensity again draws people back into the relationship. When you deny your own needs, when maybe you've learned from growing up that your needs don't make sense because nobody ever honors them, nobody ever tries to meet them, so maybe my needs don't make sense, and you stop trying to meet them and you focus on meeting other people's needs. Another reason that people can be in repeated relationships with narcissists. Also, if you're an empathic person, many people have traits of a highly sensitive person. They can be highly empathic, but if that is you, you also have to have very good boundaries around your empathy, and many people who don't are susceptible to these types of personalities. So how do we break those patterns? First of all, if you find that this is something that's happened with you, find a good therapist that understands narcissism and understands codependence and attachment issues and trauma, and start to work through some of these issues. But also reach out to a social support network. And if you don't have one, build one. Create a support system of people that can love and understand you and accept you, because narcissists tend to isolate their partners. So you want to start to break that isolation. And you have to stop rescuing. We can be caring and loving and supportive without rescuing people. If you recognize that you tend to be a caretaker of people, recognize that that keeps you from actually feeling vulnerable and asking to have your own needs met. You have to really recognize and remember that you can't fix anyone, that we're all responsible for working out our own problems and not projecting them onto other people. But you can't carry another person emotionally. So recognizing that you can't fix another person, that only they can do that, is one way that you can start to establish clearer boundaries. You have to start to prioritize yourself. That means practicing self-care, maybe getting some professional help, joining support groups, doing the things that you love and doing the things that make you feel alive. That's all part of creating a stronger sense of yourself and learning to love and accept yourself. It's really, really important if you find that you've been in relationships multiple times with narcissistic personalities. You most likely are going to need to recognize and work to heal some of your own developmental trauma from your family of origin, from childhood wounds. So this is when getting into therapy with a good qualified therapist who understands those dynamics, including attachment, can be really helpful. You have to learn how to set boundaries and how to keep boundaries. And it can be an art, especially with a narcissistic personality. Narcissists don't like boundaries, they don't respect them, but you have to set them anyway. And it can be a challenging thing to do with a narcissist, because you don't really set boundaries with a narcissist the same way you would with another person who's not super sensitive to criticism and likely to rage. We did a YouTube video a while back on setting boundaries with a narcissist. That's something you might want to look at for a little more in-depth on that. You have to learn how to practice self-compassion. In other words, how to treat yourself and talk to yourself the way you would to a very good friend. Often we can be very harsh on ourselves, very judgmental, very critical, and tell ourselves that our needs don't matter. So developing compassion for yourself means recognizing how hard this is, seeing the common humanity in your struggles. In other words, that you're not the only person struggling this way, and you don't have to go through it alone. And then offering some of that same kindness you would to a good friend towards yourself. And that can be a process that many people have never actually learned to do. You have to learn to express your own needs. Sometimes you actually have to identify your feelings first and learn how to communicate them to your partner. And recognize that your feelings and your needs, your thoughts, they do make sense and they're legitimate. And you do have a right to be understood and seen and accepted in a relationship. And a relationship in which that isn't happening is not a healthy relationship. So eventually, you actually have to know when to leave and when and how to end a relationship. This is the hardest part for many people. People often get stuck into psychological traps that keep them in a relationship long past the point they know it's time to leave. One of those is the if-only trap. They wonder all the time how things might have been different if only I had done this differently, if only I had been more XYZ at certain time. And all of those if-onlys keep people stuck in a relationship with somebody that they know on some level is toxic. Sometimes people stay in that relationship because they have some fantasy that if I leave or if they leave, they're going to get healthy for the next person. And I just want to stick around and see that happen. But when you're in a relationship with a narcissist, unless they have some self-awareness and self-reflection and they're willing to do the work, they're not going to get better for the next person. They're not going to get better unless they decide to do the work. And when a narcissist decides that they want to do that work and change behaviors, I think that deserves a lot of respect. Unfortunately, that's a very uncommon thing, and it's not something that you can expect to happen. I welcome your comments, want to hear what you think, and let me know what you'd like to hear about. Sign up for notifications, like and subscribe, so you can find out when more material is coming out. And I look forward to talking with you again. In the meantime, take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Bye-bye.